Who was the most influential person in your life that helped you realize your writer's journey?
Oh, I would say it was probably when I was going through my father's record collection, and I'd already gotten the obvious stuff, like the stuff that would appeal more to a younger person. But then I found Bob Dylan's greatest hits, and I heard that, and I'd known the radio stuff like a Rolling Stone, but then I heard these things that you could do with words and just an acoustic guitar and a voice. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. I thought you had to have a whole band, and I don't play that well with others most of the time. So that's really what started any kind of writing for me was writing songs on the guitar.
How old were you when you started storytelling? Were you very young? Was it right away? Did you grow into it?
Well, yeah, I think probably always. I remember, like, when I was a really young kid playing G.I. Joes or something, I always wanted to have these elaborate story arcs and that going on, and all of my friends just wanted to, like airplane fights and that. So I would, the times I was alone, I'd be in the basement, and I'd seen some kind of movie, some kind of dramatization of the Alamo. So I used to do that, build like a fort with blocks, and then just have wave after wave of Cobra come until even the Joes I loved eventually fell. And there was a huge story arc to it. So probably always I've been doing it, right? I always have some kind of backstory going in my head. But in terms of more concrete, yeah, probably university. That's when I kind of switched my songwriting style to something more that told a story rather than just poetic images, right?
Is there something that you carry with you from those first moments of writing that you now apply to everything that you do now?
Yeah, maybe, because like I would say, an attempt at lightness is what I go for. I don't always hit it. Sometimes I get a little too somber and I don't have to fix it in rewrites. But an attempt at lightness, of lightness of touch, getting my point across while hopefully giving someone a smile as well. And that's I think started pretty early.
Tell everybody, Jim, where you grew up.
I grew up mostly in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I was about 4 when I moved there. And most of my life was there. I did a little small town stint when I was, I don't know, 11, 12, 13, around there. Great time to live in a small town in junior high, I'll tell you that much. And then back to Calgary for high school.
What did your parents do for a living? Were they artists?
Not even close. My father was a petroleum engineer, and my mother was at home with us most of the time, and then went back to work when I was in high school. I actually worked at my high school, which you'd think might be a bit of a downer, but made sure that I had a ride there every day. So,
what has writing music done for you as a storyteller and writing longer fiction and things of that nature? Do you think that there's a correlation? Do you think there's a benefit?
So, writing music and writing fiction are so different, like structurally, right? In the way you do it. Writing music is all about just repetition, slight change. Okay, try it again this way. Yeah, put a different word in there. Slight change. Try a different chord progression. Ooh, what if we reverse that part, right? And so it's about doing it again and again and again, and just testing how it is.
Hey, America. We need to talk. I guess this has been coming for a while. It's just gotten to that point, you know? The point where we really can't keep pretending. I think it's time we broke up. Don't get me wrong, there were great times. You are fantastic. You have wicked taste in music, make great comfort food, and I love that complete and utter confidence you have in yourself and your beliefs. So many people could use a bit more of that.
Writing longer fiction, I suppose some people could do that, but it would take 10 years to get a book out, right? Where you just have to put your bum in your seat and just get the word count for that first draft and then revise after that. So there's an immediacy with writing music, is that you get to hear exactly how it's going to be and can change it from there. With writing long fiction, you need to wait at least until your first draft's done, and then probably even longer with that. But I think the idea of just going through and doing those edits after your first draft is done, I think that has given me the discipline to know that, okay, if I go through this again and change this slightly, then let's see how it goes, right? So it helps with the discipline of doing that with longer fiction, whereas a lot of times I just want to get the thing done and get it out.
Do you find, like, when you're writing music, because you have to play it and it's out loud, that when you're writing fiction, you kind of mimic that in some respects, where you use that tool to help you get a cadence in your writing?
Absolutely, yeah. I love reading things out loud. I can't always do the whole book, but if there's especially the opening chapter, always.
Hong Kong is a hard place for small things. It's a city of big buildings, big money, big suffering. Anything small is forced down through the cracks in the 21st century shell, down into the seething 19th century crotch of the city, where monsters, human and otherwise, vie for tiny postage stamp kingdoms in life or death games of status and one-upmanship. And today, a hot wind blew in hints of an oncoming storm. And I was the one who could stop it. I was the world's only exoteric consultant, an expert on the other kind who boil up from the borderlands and live in the cracks and holes our human four-square world refuses to see. I was the one who could hold back the storm. But with the humidity over Hong Kong holding sweat inside skin, maybe I just wanted to find an air-conditioned bar, flirt with a server who's paid to flirt back, and raise a cold sandmag to old days. At least I had a lead on a case. I thought of the dripping shower in my apartment back in Chungking Mansions. A plumber would be expensive, and a paycheck's a paycheck. And so I lost myself in the bouncing of the Star Ferry from Chinchachui Terminal to Central, where I had a meeting with some well-to-do Foursquare dame. I pulled my straw hat over my eyes. I wiped the sweat and grit from the back of my neck with a handkerchief and turned to the water. I thought I saw something silvery and shimmering break the surface and scatter the oil silics and flotsam. Probably just a foil wrapper from an egg waffle. I couldn't trust my eyes. They were hard and bleary from another sleepless night at the hands of my vindictive, dripping shower. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, all pigtails and pink ribbons, with a doll in a pastel patchwork blanket, shrieked and squealed on her grandfather's lap with each bump of the waves. She nearly dropped her doll. The boat hit another wave of the wake, and she was off squealing and bouncing. I turned back to the water and pulled the linen on my suit jacket around my best fraying shirt. The waffle foil had drifted alongside and was keeping pace with the boat. Weird. I pulled my hat farther down and pretended that I didn't know what that waffle foil really was. But when the rain cracked open a perfectly clear sky, I couldn't pretend anymore. I stood up. "Jahoy!" I called. "Everybody get back!" I saw terror on the faces of the passengers, and I knew I hadn't caused it. They ran for the stern. They all ran, except the little girl and her grandfather. She was pulling his hand to help him, but he couldn't get off the hard bench. I moved in to help, but the sudden rush of water behind me and the silvery flopping on the deck grabbed my attention and pulled. I looked at the dragon, silver, no more than my arm's length, and its red eyes held a terror that I'd never seen before in another kind creature from the borderlands. The fear writhed the dragon's thin body, and the beast spouted dirty water from its mouth and nose. A scream, and I turned. The grandfather clutched his chest, and the little girl screamed again. The dragon flailed its way between them and the stern of the ferry, hissing and shrieking and blocking their only way out. Dim. I guess it was up to me now.
I'll do. We're blessed to have, or used to have before everything shut down, a great monthly open mic for writers, right? So you get 5 minute slot. You get up there and you can actually hear yourself reading your own work, and that for me, that's when I find when things ring false, or I'm pushing for an effect. You know, that okay, oh, don't like that. So I always practice for those, and because you want the timing, right? And so listen to myself saying it, and like, ooh, yeah, I don't feel good reading that out loud. So then that needs to change. So definitely that would have come from the performance aspect of the music.
And vice versa, do you feel like when you're reading your writing out loud, your longer fiction, do you feel like you're helping yourself be a better performer on stage because you're doing something that's very similar but in a different context? Do you feel like that helps you as a musician on stage get that performance aspect?
Oh yeah, definitely, because and even on in like it just helps with vocalizing and that because you want to get that that feeling across to when I'm reading fiction to an audience. You want to get that same feeling across as you do with music. So yeah, it feeds back into the performance aspect.
You're also a well-renowned traveler, for those who don't know, and you actually lived in Mexico for a bit, right before the pandemic, too.
Yeah.
um, Talk about how much that influences how you write and what that has done for you as an artist.
Well, in terms of the the day job travel that I do, I'm a corporate trainer for skills like public speaking, teaching, and things like that. And then so I travel. I've seen a lot of Canada doing that, and that's not so much of an influence, except for settings, right? I can get actual places and feel what the air, the heaviness of the air feels like in different climates, or the smell of the weeds on the highway, right? So that's really helped that. In terms of living abroad, I was 4 years in China in my late 20s, early 30s, and then after that a year in Mexico, and then I took the family back down to Mexico in January just before all this hit. So that certainly has an influence because for to get my kind of a Western fix, right? Like have a good hamburger, buy some clothes that fit. When I was living in China, I'd always take trips down to Hong Kong, and that fast became my favorite city in the world. And I always knew I need to write something set in Hong Kong because just that blend, sometimes clash of cultures with the Chinese background, but then the for as long as it's been a city, the British colonialism. So and then the culture that came after that, after the handover in '97, it's just this huge swirling thing of you can find just about anything you want in Hong Kong. Obviously, the urban side, but also there's a complete wilderness island where cars aren't allowed. That's been pretty much untouched since the Second World War. So it's a great setting, and I've always wanted to write things there, and that's where the King Wong series, what I call pulp mythology, came out of. Just using the backdrop of Hong Kong as a character.
Does your guitar become an instrument in your longer fiction at all? Do you kind of play some songs or kind of get some ideas that way?
Not as much as I think I thought I would have when I first started writing long fiction again several years ago. Now, my first novel was done and I wanted to do it using kind of the cadence of blues music, of acoustic blues music that I took on at a very early age, kind of internalized. So then I did. I would often noodle around as I was. I wrote that one dictating. So again, you can have I could hear myself do it. So I'd often noodle around on some licks there. Since then, not as much, but I have done music for book trailers or promo things, ads, things like that relate to the stories.
Talk about a little bit about your song arrangement and how you construct songs. Is it a process of rewriting and
both of those, but never at the same time. Yeah, it's one of those creative mysteries that I don't want to look like too far inside the black box to see what's going on, because then it might not work anymore, you know.
But be in your own head at that point.
That's right. Yeah, there'll be times when where it starts off as okay, I'm just sitting down. Oh, that's good, and then a song comes out like just fully done, make a few tweaks here and there, and that's gorgeous. That's those magical, creative, muse, genius times that you never make happen. Then there are times where I want to do. I like that kind of 50s doo-wop kind of progression. I want to do something like that, but then I don't know what it is. I'll be in the shower sometimes. And, that's a good line for that. And then that could go in that, and then that way. So it could come that pieces come together, or that it just all comes out magically, fully formed, and like any creative person, doesn't feel like it came from me. Feels like I just kind of wrote it down.
Is it that easy for you in longer fiction, or do you have to work a little harder to get that kind of feeling?
It's always easy in the beginning, right? And it has to be. It's hard in the beginning. That's just cruel on a writer. But when you get up until you get about 40-50% through your work in progress, then because then you can just switch to another scene if you're stuck, but then you actually have to finish it when you get to about that halfway point. So that's when it tends not to come as quickly. In the beginning, it feels like it's coming out fully formed. It isn't. When I go back and read my first draft, like, ooh, I thought that was way better when I was writing it. But that might be a survival mechanism right there. Like, you better think it's good while you're writing it, or else why continue?
Right.
Yeah.
A central character in the story that they can identify with. Most of the time, that's going to be you. So you need to make yourself sympathetic. If your listeners can identify with you, then you're good. And that's not always the case with people's stories. I'm going to recount a travel story, which is an example of how not to go. Let's see how sympathetic this story is. So, JC has just gotten back from a 6-week trip to Asia. His backpack still smelling of open-air markets and exotic spices, his dreadlocks long and full. Listen in on the story he's telling his co-workers in the break room. I found most of Nepal really boring, really. I mean, I know all that Buddhist stuff already, and there's really not that much of it there anyway. And not in the cities, at least. You really have to get out in the countryside to see the place. So that's what I did. Because that's the kind of person I am. I found this guide who was from this little village on the side of a mountain, and I talked him into taking me there. There were some other people who wanted to come too, but he said no. I was the only one he wanted to travel with. Doesn't surprise me, I get that a lot. So, we're on the way to his village, and I hear this cracking sound. I knew right away what it was. Avalanche. Of course. So I scramble up an outcropping of rock and pull my Nepalese friend out of the way just as the snow comes tumbling down. I mean, this guy's from there, and I had to save him. Can you believe it? Okay, do we identify with JC there? No, not at all. And you'd be surprised how many people tell travel stories like this. I mean, I've been around. I've heard some travel stories, and it's quite remarkable.
Words were on his lips and a thin film sweat.
And if you've enjoyed looking at all these Hong Kong adventures, then check out my pulp novella, Kiss the Cockroach Queen, also set in my beloved Hong Kong. The link's right up there, or maybe down there, I don't really know.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about your writing in general. Talk about the first character you ever created and how they shaped everything you've done since.
So I really got into comic books. So the first character I probably created, aside from all the very derivative ones that I first started off with, was like this swashbuckling piratey kind of superhero called Swashbuckler, and it's kind of like one of those side characters that teams up with Spider-Man and Marvel team up in the '70s, and then you never see it again, right? But that's when I really hit on that lightness idea that we were talking about before. That this person who can save the world from unspeakable evil, but also wisecrack while doing it. And that I think I've tried to bring throughout my writing, more or less successfully, depending on the project.
It's important then for you to inject little bits of humor into the stories you tell. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. If I had the chops, I would write full on comedy. Right. I have to mix it with a little bit of urban fantasy and myth and that to flesh it out.
Right.
Yeah. I love the comedy aspect. If I can make myself laugh when I'm writing some kind of back and forth dialogue, then that's when I feel most successful.
You kind of write in this unique and interesting style. It's kind of like I call it kind of pulp esoteric style. I mean, it's kind of got this, surreal element to it that's really interesting. And I gather, characters are very important to develop, obviously, and obviously the actual stories is important. But, with this kind of style comes these rich settings and these interesting worlds that kind of you place your characters in, and so I'm kind of curious: is that how that you get that style is by using the setting and giving the audience this feeling of these external factors that shape your characters?
I think so, because when I'm writing the King Wong stories, those that have, again, like you say, this very pulp hero, this good pulp detective, but these mythical creatures on the streets of modern Hong Kong, right? And I think that sense of having those forces shape the story and the characters, because they're quite literally shaping my writing. Like I tend not to invent any kind of mythical monster or something, but just research and find there are some really strange myths around the world out there that are so much stranger and more interesting and more creative than I could ever come up with, right? So a lot of times just finding the mythical creature will shape how the plot and the narrative need to go, because they are these things. For example, in the work in progress right now, there are these Korean mythical beasts that inhabit all your cast off belongings, right? So you throw something out, you don't want it anymore, it's inhabited by this spirit, And so I mixed that with a kind of decluttering guru woman like Marie Kondo, who is encouraging everyone to cast off their belongings. So you have this army of mythical baddies to work with.
I'm curious how you construct your heroes and villains. Do you give them that definition right away? Do you kind of explore them? What are some of the characteristics that you like to shape heroes and villains with?
I wouldn't say I don't think I know them when I first start out, and that comes through the process of writing. Just for brass tacks, I like to have a catchphrase and a couple gestures or whatever that they always do, so that I can just type those in as I'm going. But that's just structural stuff. In terms of knowing the characters, it's usually probably about that halfway point where I get okay, I get this person's thing. And then I usually have a balloon comment, halfway through the thing. Here's the idea. Go back and rewrite this into the earlier chapters in your revisions.
I mean, with pulp fiction, it's typical that the hero and villains are very well defined. Do you follow that trope when you're writing that kind of that kind of fiction?
I would say so, and also, well, I hope I do. Also, I like to match them as much as possible, right? So that they may seem on the outside like mustache twirling villains, right? But they believe in terms of the villains that they're doing a good thing. So, and as does the hero. So there is kind of that murkiness, that real life murkiness, where is the hero doing a good thing, or is there yet another perspective that's going on?
Along the lines with heroes and villains too, come another very important factor, which is the ancillary characters, and having these fringe characters, like you were mentioning, the pirate character is very much that idea, and it's like they're the support element, and a lot of these pulp, because they have a shroud of mystery sometimes with them, so you kind of use these characters to misdirect, or you kind of use them to enhance whatever you're trying to appropriate. And I'm curious, in creating these characters, how much you develop them and think about them, or is it you have a purpose for, and you just need something to put in that purpose?
I think there's some of that need to just kind of we need something here. But the ancillary characters are my favorites, definitely, because that's where I can get the humor from, right? Hero villain stuff is pretty much defined by the plot. You can get maybe a little bit of banter, but the actual comedy, I think, I like getting from the ancillary characters because you can use them for that. I also use them a lot, like the companion in Doctor Who, to explain if I need any exposition. Then this is what this is, because you can't have that. You can't just say da 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 and have like that big Monty Python flashing sign: exposition, exposition, exposition. so if you can do it in dialogue, I like doing that. So it's great to have the ancillary characters for that.
Does that make it tougher to, if you have to do something serious with them, make it tougher to do a serious element with them?
No, because I like that sudden switch between serious or comic and then serious, or the other way around, right? So
yeah.
If I have an ancillary character that needs to have a noble death at the end, then it'll be funny right up till that point, and then it gets to that necessary pathos, right?
Your characters often exude this kind of coolness factor. That's the one thing I really love about reading your stuff. Is it's always like this the fawns kind of feel.
Yeah.
Especially the heroes, and even the villains in some respects. I mean, the devil and stones in the pathway, and those kind of characters always have this hip thing to them. Is it the attitude that sells that, or is it the external factors, like what they're wearing, how they it all together?
That's actually a really interesting question, because since I was 14, 15, when I discovered the music that I love, and that cool has always been a part of it, right? Like stars, sunglasses, leather jackets, that kind of very defined, almost stereotypical cool, right? And then, cool kind of went out of fashion. I read a great book called Death of the Cool. I think it was by a music critic called, I think it was Ted Gioia. And just goes through about, how cool actually started with jazz musicians in the 40s, kind of made it out to the wider world by the 60s, 70s, and then continued on as just our major cultural expression for a while. And then kind of with younger generations kind of went away so much that it was used as almost an insult, spelled Kewl, cool, right? So I had to do a little soul searching, like, man, my whole identity is built on this cool thing. Am I going to give it up, or am I going to stay the course? So I stayed the course, and now I put a lot of it into my characters, right? And the thing is with cool now in 21st century is that it always has to be just on the verge of cheesy, to walk that very fine line to keep it cool without making it just a stereotype or a pastiche, right? Yeah. So I think it's both. To answer your question, I would say it's something internal within those characters, because I am trying to push them right to the verge of cheesy, but then all the accoutrements that come with being cool, that's just ticking boxes, right?
Yeah. And in that respect, trend setting becomes a popular idea in that respect as well, right? Because then it sets things up to make them, get over a little bit, right? And
absolutely, yeah.
Move that forward and make it more cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Along the lines of cool, you've done this unique thing with your music, where you've blended kind of a spoken word aspect to what you do and how you perform with your music too. And did that come from writing more longer form fiction, or does it come from your love of like spoken word and just jamming kind of idea?
Well, it would go back at least, because like again, when I was in high school, I looked at the kind of spoken word plus jazz things that the Beats tried to do, and I was never terribly successful with it. So much of that became very much a stereotype of that walking bass to the poetry, right? So the first time I tried it was for the launch of my first novel, Stones in My Pathway, which is again all based in blues. So I read something from the first chapter while accompanying, like doing a little blues lick on the guitar, which turned out to be really, really hard.
When I wrote my first novel, Stones in My Pathway, I called it a novel in blues because it's shot through with the primal sound of the Delta blues that I took on at a young age. And it deals with the modern American folktale myth of meeting the devil at the crossroads. What would you make your deal for if the devil gave you a chance to undo a past decision to see how things would have been different? Would you take it? So, when I read from the book, I like to do a little background music to kind of get what was going on in my head, what I was hearing in my head when I was writing it. That's what I'd like to do now. In Chapter 1, Stones in My Pathway. The cold wind cut razor tracks into my cheeks as I knelt at the crossroads of the disused railway line that crossed Secondary Highway 432. I turned around knowing he was there before I heard his heels crunch on the gravel. He was almost invisible in the blackness. His His dark skin and his charcoal suit eased and blurred into the night. All I could see clearly was the crisp white of his shirt and the gleam of his grin. His old-fashioned felt trilby was perched at a precarious angle and looked about ready to fall. And there was something about his eyes. Something calculating and yellow, something mischievous and ancient, something that suggested sickness and flies swarming around swollen bellies. The glint in his eyes made me more uneasy than being interrupted in the sureness of solitude in the wee small hours on the outskirts of town, at the Crossroads. But as he came closer, it wasn't his old-fashioned clothes or the yellow eyes that struck me the strangest. It was the hands. The fingers were long and stretched, with knobbly knuckles punctuating them at inhuman intervals. They were fingers like the legs of some deep-sea creature. They were alien autopsy fingers. And he waved them in front of his face as he walked towards me. "Hiya, pal. Don't get up, he said, still grinning. "I'm not fixing to disturb you, my man. Just wanted to see if you'll be needing any help on this here wicked cold night. What can Papa Scratch do for you?" I was still semi-crouched, my hand on the gravel, where I buried what I thought was a human finger bone with cuneiform carvings that I'd gotten from a mystical homeless guy earlier that night. I straightened up slowly. I looked to his trim mustache under his broad, flat nose so I wouldn't have to look into his yellowed eyes. I was just... I'm not sure what I was doing. I said and pulled on my beard. Papa Scratch twirled a toothpick around in his grinning teeth. "No need to explain, man. I gotcha. I dig, man, I really do." He took a step closer and clicked his teeth together 3 times. "You want to make a deal?"
And then recently, a couple months ago, there was an 8-hour song challenge. So you just took a Saturday, and the challenge was to write, record, and release a track in a standard, day job length of shift in 8 hours, right? But, well, that'll be a fun challenge. And I kind of had an idea for a song in mind, but then I thought, you know what? There's this kind of almost essay-like piece that I've been wanting to write. So you know what? I'm doing it. I'm doing spoken word. I'll do the musical underneath, and then I'll just read the kind of, I call it a tone essay over top. And I loved how it turned out. And so they did a listening party at the end of the day, right? And someone announced, "Now here's a spoken word piece," and a lot of people said, "Oh, here we go," right? And I think I convinced them. Well, and it was full on in the midst of the protest, the Black Lives Matter.
Oh yeah.
So I think there were some expectations with the spoken word piece, but no, I just kind of gave it this nice groove, and then this tender breakup letter kind of idea.
And hey, let's not forget, you saved the world from tyranny. Saved the world. I can't overstate how glorious that was. But, there's always a but, right? You saved the world, but that was a long time ago. Heck, in 1945, you were still a fresh-faced high schooler. Has there been anything like that since? Sure, I could list off all the little things about you that drive me nuts, the rude way you talk to serving staff, all those baggy cargo shorts you wear, how you always take jokes too far. Always. But it's not those things. Not really. I guess I'm just worried that if I continue to be this close to the way you treat other people, to the way you treat yourself, I'll start to see it as normal. That I'll only pay attention to the gregarious friendliness and stop seeing the utter disregard for basic human dignity beneath it. So I've got to go. America, I love you. That's why I can't be around to watch you self-destruct. I can't watch what you're doing to yourself. Because I might start doing it too. But, there's always a but, right? But, maybe do you want to get a burger and listen to some records? Once more, for old time's sake.
Yeah, I love the way it worked out. So I want to experiment more with that. This musical form, but also without the what Leonard Cohen calls the tyranny of rhyme.
Yeah. The interesting thing about music that I find very fascinating in terms of how it gathers an audience is a lot of times it's discovery. It takes a moment for people to buy into it, right? At first they're very resistant to it, but then the beat catches them, or a word or lyric catches them, and I'm wondering, I'm sure you've noticed that and you understand the aspect of performing and songwriting, and do you think that in writing in general that could be a thing that could really help your own writing and get people interested right away? Is that something you think about because you have to hook them?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think it also goes into the idea of a writer's community, right? Like I've discovered some great writers just by being at that open mic I talked about, right? That I wouldn't have heard. I mean, they're indie published or not published at all. A lot of times, man, this guy's good. This person is good, right? So absolutely. I mean, it's and then that creates that sense of community, very much in the way that the musical community has always had, because of things like opening acts or open mics and things like that.
It's very similar too that once you hook them, they stay with you.
Yeah.
You build an audience that way, right? And
Definitely.
They become fans.
Well, yeah, and they do their own word of mouth. And,
Yeah, that's cool. That's a neat aspect of it as well. They help you help yourself a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you think that your music has helped your authoring in that respect too, in the marketing aspect?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because I came from that background of hitting the open stages every week. Because usually with music, they're more frequently than I've seen with writing and spoken word stuff. So just hitting them, being there, having a presence, talking to people, networking without in a very informal way. I don't mean like exchanging business cards and a handshake.
Yeah.
Now anyway, but you get to know people, you get to know their work, you get to know them as people, and so just having a presence in the community was always a huge thing for music, because that's how you got gigs, right? Somebody knew, hey, I need somebody to do this. Can you do it? Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, you bet. And so I think that has definitely transferred into the writing thing, and of course when I was in the music community, that was long before. I guess not before the internet, but before anyone really had the internet, and long before things like social media. So I think I've also learned to apply that on the writing side, in the writing community, to an online presence, to just always just have a presence.
Well, getting back to your writing for a moment, we've already talked about surrealism, that you have this element of surrealism, and you've mentioned that it's an urban fantasy setting that you kind of typically wander into and construct around, and it's something that people will be easy to identify with, right? They'll recognize the place or the
would say both, honestly. I think what I took from all those comic books, living in a small town, and I was a Marvel guy in those days, was that Stan Lee idea of, if you believe there's somebody who can have the powers of a spider, I'll give you everything else. I'll make everything else believable. I'll make it a real city with real streets that you could look up on a map, right? I'll give you everything else if you give me this one thing, the suspension of disbelief, right? So I think I've kept that, and I keep that with the Hong Kong I write about. I am constantly on Google Maps trying to remember. Oh, where was that one street? That one that had the two that came to a tri. Oh yeah, right, perfect. Okay, I need the name of that, right? So it has this authenticity of place, and I give you all of that, and then all you have to believe is that this character believes that there are mythical creatures on the streets of Hong Kong. But even that is, you have an unreliable narrator on it.
Yeah.
So maybe it's there, or maybe it's all in his head.
But in the same token, you mentioned earlier how you looked these mythical creatures up, and you use kind of the same, the pathos of the grandfather telling the son stories of the mythical creature, to kind of teach them a lesson. Is that kind of the idea of that as well?
Yeah, I'd say so. That well, I'd like to describe it as like escapism for the thinking reader, because I've always thought we need all the escapism we can get, and now even more so, right? And even that's not going to be enough. But so often, escapism for certain readers doesn't really respect the intelligence enough, right? So what I wanted to do is have this where, yes, it's a fantasy adventure. It's got the exoticism of a far off city. It's got the wisecracks, the funny bits, but also it has real creatures from world mythologies, right? So if something in that strikes a chord in you, you can go look this up and find that it does exist, and find the stories it was originally told in. And from a musical perspective, I find the setting, the baseline, right? It's always there. It's always going. It keeps you anchored, while you might have wild guitar solos going over it, but that baseline is still there. It's still a real place.
The thing that I mean, for people who don't know, Kiss of the Cockroach Queen was my favorite novel of 2019.
Oh,
and it's so brilliant. And the idea is that you jump us into the story right away, and you introduce a mythical creature like within maybe 4 paragraphs. The characters, but you subtly bring in the lead into that, and it's kind of hit us with the surrealism, and then you bring in the kind of anchoring that this, like you said, that unreliable narrator. And so in selling those points and creating that element, do you find that's the best way to start your stories? Or do you look at it's just that story in particular had that moment that was easy to define and get it started?
That's really a good question. That particular story, Kiss of the Cockroach Queen, the first of the King Wong books, I was looking for a way to introduce the world, right? That there are, or at least the narrator thinks that there are these mythical creatures on the streets of modern Hong Kong, before getting into the case and the whole detective-y side of it. Mm-hmm. So that was just a full-on save the cat. Okay, what can we do that would introduce that, and also make this guy kind of likable, because he's got a lot of mannerisms that are a little rough, right? So that was a full-on save the cat thing. I did use it I am using it in the work in progress, where without giving away too much, there's a Japanese creature, a creature from Japanese mythology that, like these Korean ones, inhabits cast off umbrellas only, right? So like, I can't make this stuff up. This is building. You throw away an umbrella, a spirit gets into it, animates it. It's got this one big eye and this long tongue, and it hops around, terrorizing people. So that's how that one starts off with just right into it, amusing, real mythical creature, and yeah, I love that to introduce the world really.
These characters are reoccurring characters. You're kind of you're doing one-offs and serializing these in a certain aspect, but you're also continuing the character stories. You're really keeping that characters and you're making Easter eggs and pointing back to certain things and referencing certain things. But it's important for the character to still grow and still evolve. And so I'm wondering how you wrestled with that and what you thought about and how much you take into account to reveal each moment that to show that evolution or to show even a de-evolution in some respects.
Yeah, that one was hard. That one was really hard. Like, do you want to go the James Bond? Let's call it the James Bond model, where the character has to stay pretty much the same, right? In more recent times, they've changed the world around him, but for that character to continue on, he has to have that coolness all the time, and coolness means unfazedness, which means you're not really changing that much, right? Do I want to go that way, or do I want to have an overarching character development arc that goes from one place to another? Because I also want people just be able to pick up the books at any given time. There's no order to this at all. So I don't know how successful I was with that with the middle one, but in the one that I'm rewriting now, I think I've got that change. There's a lot of character development, and yet you can still just start on that one.
There's some influences and there's some things that people would recognize in normal culture, mythical stories. I mean, especially Stones. Stones had the story that we've heard a million times here is a Crossroads, and the devil's offering you an opportunity kind of idea. And so, with your influences, was it that important to you to kind of pay homage to that, but you don't steal from any of that, or you don't take any of that. You kind of twist it on its own right, and that's the brilliance of how you write. And so, but I imagine to you that was very important for homage. Is that accurate to say?
Definitely, yeah. That particular thing came from I was in this Italian restaurant in this suburban mall parking lot in San Diego about 10 years ago, and they had this painting on the wall. These blue faces kind of screaming, and some trains, and like a blues musician. And I'm like, odd thing for an Italian restaurant, but it struck me. I wanna write something that involves that whole Delta blues thing, because I like I say, I completely internalized that at 15, 16 with all the recordings I could find back then. And so then when NaNoWriMo, when National Novel Writing Month came a few years ago, I thought, maybe I'll do that blues thing. That'll be fun. I could do that. Okay, so obviously start with that very modern American myth of making a deal with the devil at the crossroads to get what you want, which is never going to be really what you want, right? And then I meshed that with some of the things I was thinking about and dealing with after turning 40. Like, what if I took a different road in my life? How would it have been different? So that's the basic. That's the crossroads of Stones in My Pathway. That it's a literal crossroads, but also a metaphorical crossroads that you go back to, take a different road, and you get to see how it would have been different. The devil shows you this is how it would have been different. So it's almost kind of like a reverse It's a Wonderful Life.
Well, the devil came to me, says you're not strong, You're not strong. You're not strong enough. You'll never carry on. Well, the devil came to mind. Say you're not strong. You're not strong. You're not strong enough. You'll never carry on. Well, the devil came to mind. Say you'll be lonely. You'll be lonely. And you'll see your one true happiness ever only.
Do you find that you tend to construct an album though like a story? Do you kind of want to do it in that respect, or is there a little bit more clinicalness to it?
I think it's both. Because yes, it is very clinical. There's a tried and true method for sequencing an album where you start off with like the most crowd pleasing one, right? And then go from there. You put your best one at the end, and the one that's maybe not so good on the album tucked in right before that. Now people play with the formula, of course, but I think in doing that, unconsciously, I am making it into that story form where you start on a situation, and then something happens in that situation that makes it untenable, that makes it difficult, and so then we need to transform the way we do things. And then closing track of an album is always going to be the big transformational one, for me at least. I love those big anthemic closing tracks, right?
So in that respect, do songs not make it on certain things? Do you hold them off for certain reasons because of that formula, or because of it doesn't fit the story?
Yeah, definitely. And it's not always because of quality, right? It's I don't think the mood really goes. So maybe a song that I'm not quite as happy about gets on there because it fits the formula, it fits the story arc throughout the album. Yeah, definitely.
So tell me, the big question here, Jim, is what does every Jim Jackson story, whether it's a song or a novel, have to have?
Okay. Easy answer. Some kind of sense of cool. We talked about that before.
Yeah.
I like that. It's an homage to my favorite part of the 20th century, right? Like that when cool was a living force that made people happier. You know, it's changed now, but so definitely that. I would say some kind of sense of lightness, even if it's kind of a dark humor, which or even like a sarcastic kind of humor, which sometimes it does in like a breakup song or something like that. But yeah, those two things, cool and light. There's some good adjectives.
Well, the devil came to me. Said you're not strong. You're not strong. You're not strong enough. You'll never carry on. So I said to the devil, yeah, I said to the devil. I looked him right in his bright blue eyes and I said,
Satan? You're on mute, Satan. Gotta unmute your mic, buddy. Unmute.